So my guest today is Maria Iacob, who is an expert on international finance. Now, Maria was born in Romania and she's worked extensively in the UK, and she's joining me today from Cyprus. So welcome, Maria.
Thank you for having me, Catherine. Hello.
So Maria works on a system of excellence, and she does this based on 3 pillars. She has excellence based on experience, because she spent over a decade on the trading desks, in Forex, in commodities, shares and options, and also in personal banking at HSBC. And then she moved into wealth management, fintech, and social investing. Her excellence is also based on personal passion, simply because she had the horrible experience more than 3 decades ago that the savings of her family were lost after poor financial advice, which has to be the most devastating thing that you can imagine to happen, or one of them. And she also believes very strongly in excellence born of preparation. So Maria holds a number of UK investment and retirement planning qualifications from the UK, as well as an MSc in economics and international affairs. It's a very impressive resume we have there, Maria. So what was it? Maybe you can give us a brief rundown. What inspired you to go into this field of specialization that you've entered into?
I believe that it all stems from my love for numbers. One of my friends actually says that, Maria, if I turn you upside down and I shake you a bit, I believe that out of your head will just fall dozens of numbers, just numbers. You'd be shaken off numbers. So in that respect, I like logical systems. I like creating a flow when it comes to decision, action, and management. So in that respect, I believe it's just the love for numbers that pulled me closer to the world of money, so to speak. And in that respect, understanding exactly how everything works in the world allows me as a person to make informed decisions, which I believe to be a pillar of financial health.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people are kind of shaking their heads at this idea of having a love of numbers, but on the other hand, having a financial advisor who, let's say, who has this love of numbers is something that can give people a great sense of security. This, I know from personal experience that this is something very critical. So, yeah. And so today we're going to talk about how people can transfer money between different countries. And we're not talking, just to be clear, we're not talking about how you can secure payment on a container of some kind of commodities. We're literally talking about how to get your money from A to B, and which are the points that you need to take into consideration when you want to make such a transfer, right?
Exactly. I mean, nowadays, money moves the world. Yeah, we know that. Time is money, so they say, at least in the States. But in that respect, we try to put together a simple presentation which helps your normal investor, your normal individual who wants to transfer, as you very well said, money from A to B, understand exactly what sort of options are available based on the region they're looking to send money to, or basically receive the money from.
Okay, so maybe you can start your presentation and we can see what are some of the key considerations that people need to take into account when they're transferring their money internationally.
Yes, of course. So first and foremost, to have a bit of an overview in terms of what happened through the past year, we've went through basically a financial earthquake, if we can call it like that, from a personal finance perspective to a corporate finance perspective as well. And overall, if myself I've learned anything throughout the past 6 to 8 months, is that e-commerce is becoming king when it comes to transferring money and purchasing things, especially when you're limited in terms of mobility. So in that respect, a lot of companies were actually quite limited, simply because many jurisdictions still use credit cards, still use bank wire, still use the old school bank transfer form or credit notes, in which case they might have found themselves a bit in a corner where they basically couldn't reconcile their transactions. So having said that, I went through a couple of reports which were released recently. Basically the eldest information you'll find in this report is from June 2020, and the newest one is from about 3 weeks ago. And in terms of payments, even the World Bank and the whole world realized that smart payments are the new path in terms of transferring money from A to B. So in that respect, we will be looking at a couple of areas today. For example, what sort of ideas you need to take into consideration when you're transferring money in terms of factors related to payment providers, related to amounts, to currencies, fees, which are well important when you're looking at funds. And of course, what sort of options are available to facilitate different payments, whether they're broker to broker or broker to client as well.
Excellent.
So in that respect, I thought it was quite a nice comparison, because nowadays we don't really see our money anymore. It's pretty much just a digit in a bank account or an online account. But many years ago, we used to exchange goods for salt. Not many people actually know that. So salt used to be a currency a couple of hundreds of years ago. We moved on to banknotes. We moved on to gold and other commodities to exchange for money. And nowadays, even though it's not really a commodity, we're relying quite a lot on digital money. We're relying quite a lot on credit cards, the plastic cards, of course, and on e-wallets as well. This particular switch was determined simply by the advance in technology and basically the economy, which migrated from the factory era towards basically the service era.
Yeah.
So nowadays, since there are more payment methods, everybody's trying to revolutionize the whole economic environment. There are way too many options. And when you have way too many options, it can become so difficult to try and understand exactly the terms and conditions, or as you will remember, the fine print. Every company has a fine print. They all have potentially pros and cons. And there are few of those who spend hours researching different payment methods when there's hundreds and hundreds of them, just to find the one which is the best in their particular case. So in that respect, I really encourage whoever's watching this to actually write down a couple of answers, because I've tried to structure this particular flow of identifying a payment provider by using a couple of questions.
Okay, great. So that makes it easier.
Yeah. At least myself, being a computer engineer as well, I find it that with an avalanche of data, it's always good to be very clear as to what sort of an objective you're trying to accomplish. So in that respect, yeah, that's fine. You have money to send or to receive. It's always a good thing. However, we also need to be clear about what sort of transfer you're looking at. Specifically, whether you're looking to transfer or receive funds from a broker, from a business, or a consumer, or in many cases where companies are still considering expansion into a new market, whether they also need to interact with the government, because as you very well know, not all of the governments in the world are aligned with the latest advances in financial, in payment solutions as well. So that would be something worth considering.
That's very true. I think a lot of governments around the world, they're either very advanced or they're a little bit more conservative about taking up new options. This would be true to say.
Being conservative is a very diplomatic way of putting it, to be honest. The majority of the developed world is trying to speed up in aligning their payment methods with the most commonly used. However, I'm sure you're well aware, having worked in an international environment for almost 20 years, that many countries still have quite a lot of room for improvement.
Yes, also quite a diplomatic way of putting it.
So in that respect, knowing exactly where you're trying to send some money, the second question you'd need to ask yourself is what sort of amount you're looking to transfer. And this is a very important aspect simply because usually especially in Europe and nowadays in the 168 countries adhering to the anti-money laundering directives and legislation, wherever you're looking to transfer more than 10,000 euros, US dollars or GBP, usually will be asked for a source of wealth or source of funds, if you like, if you're specifically if you're looking to transfer funds from a company. So in that respect, you need to be prepared to run through a bit of due diligence, especially as the amount you're transferring increases.
Okay.
Having said that, we have access to payments everywhere in the world, but we also need to take into account currency conversions, because at the end of the day, when it comes to the European Union, for example, we do have additional transfer methods from one bank to another called SEPA, which actually allow you to transfer anywhere in between 100 to 10,000 euros with fees just under 10-15 euros. Whereas if you're looking internationally at transfers such as SWIFT, on top of the usual bank fee you'll be paying, you're also looking at FX exchange rates. So having said that, if you're looking at banks, usually the exchange rates are anywhere around 2.5 to maybe 3.5% per transaction.
Yes.
This can vary based on whether or not you're using a dedicated broker which only facilitates FX, or if you're just looking at a payment provider which includes an FX, a foreign exchange facility in their services, the charges might be higher. So in that respect, the higher the amount, usually the more leverage you have to negotiate your fees with a broker. Therefore, it's well worth considering whether or not you're looking to convert some money.
Absolutely. Bank rates can change very often.
Oh, yes, they do. Usually bank rates are related to regional bank standards. But then again, when the interest rates cause a bit of a domino effect in terms of local markets, they also tend to affect the exchange rates with countries all over the world. So in that respect, having decided whether or not you need to do an exchange rate and writing that answer down, the next step would be to ask yourself how often you make international payments, because at the end of the day, you have all sorts of options, subscription, one-off. I believe you came across at least one on Google or scrolling through Facebook asking you whether you need to transfer your money. And in that respect, with one-off payments, it's always worth considering solutions which do not require a subscription per se, or where you need to pay a subscription fee. Having said that, it's quite difficult in some circumstances to decide whether or not that one-off may not just as well move into a regular requirement. However, it's good to first try a provider, because I'm sure you're aware opinions are spread. I mean, I might just interact with a specific payment provider which does a great job for me, but doesn't do the same good job for a different party. So in that respect, if you really want to test somebody, you can always do it. Check their minimum and see exactly whether or not you can do a test transfer, a one-off, to see exactly the speed of execution, to see what sort of documents they ask from you, and specifically what's your customer experience. Because at the end of the day, that's a very important factor nowadays.
Yeah,
In that respect,
I've had this experience as well, that somebody who's worked well for me for transferring money, that I actually, let's say, recommended somebody else to have a look at, and then their payment took several weeks to arrive. Mine went in 2 hours and theirs took several weeks.
I'm afraid so. I was involved in such circumstances as well. I'm afraid, as a financial advisor, as you might imagine, I actually try to direct my clients into using a specific payment method or another based on their particular jurisdiction. But as you very well said, Sometimes opinions are split, and of course, it's always worth remembering the fact that providers also change their level of service. So just because they're excellent right now and they will earn the crown of the best payment provider in their particular field, that doesn't necessarily mean that they will keep the crown. So that's, let's say, the next level in customer retention.
Okay.
Specifically about regular payments, it's worth considering this particular products simply because there are plans which offer additional benefits. At least once in your lifetime, I'm sure you've heard of bonus miles when you're basically traveling quite a
Yes.
lot. And in terms of customer retention, nowadays payment providers are trying to implement the same kind of bonuses, of structures. They allow scheduled payments as well, specifically for those purchasing or sending payments within the same location more than once. So this is something worth considering. If you can get something extra for sending your money using the same payment provider, it's fine in my books at least.
It sounds like a good plan. Yes.
Exactly, exactly. Now, one of the areas that everybody's very attentive to is how soon will the money reach its destination? Especially if you're on the receiving end, I believe you're just checking the phone to see whether you received the text message, a notification, how long will the money take to reach my bank account or my card or my account. So in that respect, it's always worth knowing exactly what are the general timelines for transfers. Specifically,
Yes.
debit and credit card are usually instant. Something that not many people know that is specifically that a common banking practice is to block the amount on your card and then actually take the money out within a couple of days. Specifically for those using professional accounts, you will see that the transaction doesn't show up at the right time. So it's worth bearing in mind the payments you're making to ensure you go into overdraft, because the overdraft accounts, let's be honest, they're one of the most expensive types of lending.
The bank likes it.
Well, we
Kind
like
of.
it if we really need it. I mean, the overdrafts are there for a reason. If you really need to make a specific payment and you go into overdraft, that's perfectly fine. That's the whole thing. However, it's always good to remember whenever you're making payments, because people tend to forget that they went overdrawn and then the charges are quite steep.
Yeah. If you don't
Having
agree it
said
in
that,
advance, it's very expensive.
oh, it's quite expensive, yeah. Usually start around 16% at least per annum, and that bites. It's a charge that really, really bites.
Yes.
So moving on to bank wires, we're all accustomed with making a bank transfer. If you're looking at the European Union, you've got SEPA transfers, which are usually processed within 1 to 2 business days. If you're using SWIFT, your usual bank wire, it may take anywhere around 3 to 5 business days for the funds to reach its destination. In terms of the newer payment methods of sorts, you've got e-wallets. They can be instant or within 2 to 6 hours based on the payment providers. Prepay cards, since you left the cash with the payment provider, they will debit any other account instantly. And of course, if you're looking at transferring crypto, it takes on average around 10 to 15 minutes for the transaction to be cleared through the blockchain. Usually cryptocurrency transactions are also processed manually, so bear in mind that just because you hit the deposit button, that doesn't necessarily mean the funds will be delivered instantly. So it can take around 10 to 15 minutes. And in terms of direct carrier billing, you're looking at about an hour to receive or to ensure that the other party, the receiving party, has the funds in their account.
Wow. It's good that you're got an overview of the available options. I'm a little bit overwhelmed already, I think, from...
That wasn't my intention. I do apologize if it looks overwhelming, but when it comes to information, I believe there's a very complex way of describing options and a very simple way. Just presenting the most commonly used ones is not fair in my opinion, because at the end of the day, our viewers are from different countries, and maybe one payment method which works really well in Europe or in the States may not work very well in their particular region. So in that respect, we have quite a lot of options. All sorts of cards which we're well accustomed to, e-wallets which are newer, online banking which has started to pick up the pace since banks are losing on the normal bank wires. And of course, we've got the invoice with the payment after delivery, very common for trading websites, for e-commerce websites. If you ever order from Amazon or from eBay, you had the option to pay after delivery. Or with the newest providers trying to actually approach generation XY, which, as we very well know, have a bit of a juggle learning the financial ropes. Such payments can also be made in installments. This is something quite new, but it's catching up quite quickly. And in that respect, of course, it's really worth mentioning cryptocurrencies as well, which has been on the news for a very long time. I'm sure a lot of people heard at least of Bitcoin and of basically techie money, which is what cryptocurrency is. So in that respect, you do have quite a lot of options, but bear in mind, just because there are 10 payment methods here, that doesn't necessarily mean they're all available or preferred in your particular jurisdiction. So
okay. So this is another thing that I, for my questions, when I'm deciding for myself, need to think about what's best for where I am and weigh up the pros and cons.
exactly, and not just where you are, you also need to consider on the receiving end as well, their location, their jurisdiction, and any potential limitations in that region. Because usually if we live in a particular area for a bit of time, we get used to the local payment methods. We learn the ropes quite easily. But when it comes to sending money to a third party, especially if you need to make some upfront payments for new collaborators or to purchase some goods, it's well worth knowing in advance exactly what sort of payment methods you can use, so you can speed up the whole process.
Perfect.
I know that this table looks a bit complex. I just wanted to gather, for those of you who are not finance savvy, a couple of details with regards to what sort of payment guarantees you have, which are the most common brands, and of course the market reach. The market reach would basically mean where are you most likely to come across these particular payment methods, and of course where is it less likely to use, for example, a card or a e-wallet in that respect. So having said that, I won't go through everything. This is something specifically for those of you who are really looking to pick up a pen and be very serious about making the right choice. Having said that, if you have a VIP account, you will have the whole presentation available to you. Feel free to download it. And if you have any sort of a question, Catherine and I are always here and happy to help. So in that respect, I'll just go very briefly through a couple of payment methods in that respect. If you'd like to use a credit card, of course, you'd be looking at a very high protection against fraud and chargebacks, because more often than not, even with the chip and PIN technology, which is quite used nowadays, banks tend to be very serious about fraud. Having worked in a bank, I have processed actually fraud complaints. So in that respect, I know for a fact that banks don't play around when it comes to fraud. But when you're looking at making international transfers, you'd be looking at e-commerce and specifically POS. Basically, point of sales is what POS stands for. So if you go to a supermarket and you'd like to pay, they will most likely have a point of sale or a POS where you can just use your card to pay for your goods. Credit cards are a very popular method for transfers into the States and Europe. But if you're going to Latin America, specifically Brazil, Asia or Africa in some respect, credit cards won't be the best thing to take with you, especially if you're traveling or if you need to stay there for a couple of weeks. Having said that, we're looking at debit cards next. They're quite popular in Russia, in Mexico, in Canada. Everybody's using a debit card. It's your normal card where you just put money with the bank and you can spend only what you have, as opposed to the credit card, which allows you a bit of a juggle and on average about a month's time to put back the money on the card before getting charged extra. So you'd be looking at debit cards usage in Russia, Mexico, and Canada, as we said. But if you're going to Germany or the Netherlands, they don't really use cards. That was a bit of a shock. I mean, they're the main one.
It's improving. It's getting more.
You'd be surprised because according to the latest statistics, actually, especially the Nordic countries are migrating more towards e-wallets to mobile money, which we will discuss a bit more in the next couple of minutes. So in that respect, cards are losing ground, but I wouldn't say entirely. Whoever said that cards are due to disappear, I believe they were wrong, at least in my humble opinion.
Yeah, I think it'll take a while before that state is reached.
Exactly, I agree. If you, of course, are looking at prepaid cards, which are really, really, really well used in areas where they don't have a lot of access to the internet or they're scared about frauds, you're looking at Brazil, Russia, India, and even China, and more often than not in underbanked regions. That means emerging markets, if you like. If you're looking at Africa, if you're looking at countries which don't really have the best economies in the world. But having said that, there is one payment method which caught a lot of ground in the world. That's e-wallets. It's very, very popular in China, India, and the States, especially amongst young people. And if you're looking at Asia and China in particular, which is the world leader in e-wallet payments, you're looking at 58% payments made just with e-wallets. So if you want to survive when you go across to China, you really need to have an e-wallet account such as PayPal, Alipay, Google Pay, and such. But of course, if you're going to Europe and the States, specifically around the adult population, you wouldn't be using e-wallets that much.
No, although I do know that, for example, in Africa, that e-wallets are also starting to increase because Alibaba and China has such huge influence. So Alipay as an e-wallet solution is increasing.
Yes, that's right. Alipay signed a lot of agreements across the world to expand their global reach, so they can basically facilitate payments not just in the most developed countries, but in emerging ones as well. So in that respect, yes, they're catching up. However, from a fraud perspective, they're slightly less prioritized compared to prepaid cards. So if you're going to South Africa, for example, everybody will be using a prepaid card.
Okay.
So in that respect, banks really try to actually put in an effort, seeing that the applications for credit and debit cards decreased and that bank wires are slowly being replaced by more efficient e-payment methods. So a lot of banks actually created an online banking system. It's quite common amongst Europeans in the States as well. But what many people don't know is that within the past 3 to 4 years, there was a boom in online banking institutions only. So not necessarily just a bank which decided to expand its services so it doesn't lose its clients, but online banks per se, such as Revolut, for example.
Mm-hmm. Or I think N26 also in
Germany.
Germany.
N26, exactly. In Germany, it's well popular in Germany. Yes, that is correct. So having said that, moving on to direct debit, you're looking at a no question asked refund within 8 weeks. So this is the only payment method which provides you a no questions asked refund. So in case there is a chargeback, you do need to wait, maybe in some cases up to 13 months after the settlement. However, you will receive the funds back. When we talk about direct debit, we're talking about an instruction that you gave to your bank stating that you'd like to transfer a fixed or a variable amount of money on a monthly basis to pay, for example, your bills.
Yes.
This can be done in many European countries by direct debit. Specifically, if you're looking at Germany, Holland, Austria, or Spain, these are very commonly used payment methods.
Yes, me too. I do these.
I've done it as well, up to one point where the bank started having small errors in processing direct debits. So myself, I'm actually a big fan of card payments. I like to know exactly at every point in time how much money I have, how much money I have to pay. Therefore, instant transfers are my favorite, to be perfectly honest. But there are also those who prefer invoice payments or installments, specifically if you're looking at purchasing goods which cost a bit more, like appliances, or even in some cases clothes. There are a couple of websites which allow you to actually purchase attire using installments, and it's quite catchy, specifically for the youngsters which don't really have access to lump sums straight away. So you'd be looking at invoice and installment payments, popular in Germany, Benelux, Austria, Switzerland, Turkey, and of course the Nordics as well, which rely quite heavily on installment payments. And our dear beloved cash, the one that lately we don't see in the wallets anymore, just in digits on a computer screen or on a mobile screen as well. It's still the king in markets such as Brazil, if you're looking at paying with Boleto, or Russia, the United States, or Japan. Most of the developed markets actually are trying to build their own payment methods based on cash, where you can actually make quick transfers. The only downside would be that you can no longer reverse such payments. So once you paid, you left the money with the payment provider, it's gone. You cannot put in a chargeback if by any chance the money was just sent in error, if that ever happens.
I guess people think of spending cash as it's something it's spent, and you don't think of using it for something where you need your cash back in most cases, I guess.
Exactly. But in some cases, look, I'm not sure if many of our viewers are fashion enthusiasts. Myself, I'm a big shoe person. So in that respect, you have the 30-day refund policy. In some cases, you may not get all the cash back. So having said that, it's well worth putting in a payment via card or an e-wallet, which can be easily reversed, both for myself as a buyer and for the company itself.
Okay.
And the last two payment methods, you can also use direct carrier billing. Again, payments cannot be reversed, and they're very popular in South Korea, Norway specifically for gaming, if you're purchasing any sort of a gaming service, and of course in the Nordic countries. When you're looking at cryptocurrencies, of course you're looking at Mexico, India, Brazil, United Arab Emirates, North America, and of course the EU. But these are specifically popular in countries where you have very high rates of card declines. Basically, if you're trying to pay with your card and it gets rejected, your options can be quite limited. So this is where cryptocurrencies found a niche market.
Okay. Good to know.
Of course. Yeah, there are quite a few. I don't want you to be overwhelmed, but in that respect, if you're ever considering switching to a different payment method, it's always good to know the benefits and the drawbacks of that particular method. Having said that, if you're looking to send money someplace, of course, you really need to know where you're sending the money. There are a couple of people that just want to send the money in different jurisdictions. So in that respect, it's worth writing down these jurisdictions, specifically because of the influx of options. When you have so many options, some providers may be available in 2 regions and may not be in a third one, or some other ones can just basically be available in just 1 jurisdiction. So for that reason, I know it may sound a bit counterproductive, but it's worth writing down where you're looking to send the money, especially if you're a business.
And if I'm looking to sell to a customer, then I also have to look and to check that he can actually pay me. I mean, this,
Exactly.
let's talk about
Exactly.
the most important thing.
That actually works both ways, because it's all nice and well just to send money, but it's always good to receive money as well. And when it comes to commerce, physical or e-commerce, it tends to go both ways. So as I mentioned before, there are more details about specific payment
Yes.
methods for specific areas. This is available for those of you purchasing a VIP ticket. So if you'd like to download this, feel free to proceed accordingly. In these particular slides, you'll be able to see, for example, which are the preferred payment methods for the European Economic Area, why and how you can use particular methods, and of course, quite importantly, in LATAM, where there are big differences in what you're used to as a payment method. They have quite a lot of differences, they have quite a lot of challenges. So in that respect, it's always worth knowing exactly the limitations when sending money abroad. You've got, of course, Africa, APAC, and of course, you've got MENA as well, with specific payment methods. If you're looking at e-wallets, you've got a list of particular e-wallets you can use in every region. So this comes quite in handy, especially if you're looking to make a bit of a comparison to see which one comes cheaper. But for that, I have an extra tool for you, which you'll see in the end. So in that respect, feel free to download the PDF, feel free to explore this information, even if it's just for one transfer. It's very useful because you have a record of what you can do in the future. And additionally, I also added a lot of information about transfer fees and the payment methods which are due to they're due to lead the financial payment markets around the globe. Having
This,
said that,
I think, is one of the most important things for most people to consider, because I think that this is the point that and the rate of exchange, that not every payment method offers the same rate of exchange, and not every payment method offers the same costs for actually making a transfer in one direction. Sometimes I think it varies which direction you send the money as well, for PayPal, for example.
Yes, that is correct. Yes, yeah. Yes, that is correct. The direction you're sending the money, basically the channel, if you like, or the particular corridor, as they call it in the World Bank, makes a massive difference, especially in terms of costs. Having said that, everybody will be well aware of costs. So whenever you're looking to purchase something or to sell, the first thing you ask is, how much does it cost me? And you need to weigh in that particular cost in the whole picture to see exactly how much it really costs. Because initially, most of the payment providers just display it will cost you this much. The second you try to proceed with the payment, extra fees and extra charges are listed, and until you reach the point where you can actually transfer the funds, you realize that what was advertised and what you actually received are two different things. And that's where a specialist actually brings value, because at the end of the day, don't get me wrong, you have access to mountains and mountains of information. But where experience makes a difference is surfing through this information and seeing exactly how to read the fine print to basically draw a line and say this costs this much, the other option is better, or I'm better off choosing an entirely different option altogether. So in that respect, I found it very useful to review the World Bank reports, the latest one issued in September 2020, specifically about remittance prices worldwide. And it was quite surprising to find that the digital remittance cost is still quite high, 5.29%, even though, as you very well see from the chart, it decreased considerably since 2008. However, since digital services are cheaper, non-digital remittance, meaning physically going to the bank and sending some money to a third party, tends to be more expensive, with a world average of about 7.24%. So the average cost by region, as you can see, it varies significantly. It can go as low as 4.98 or 8.47. So knowing exactly what sort of fees you're looking to pay if you switch the region or if you switch the receiver is quite important. That's why it's always good to remember what's the global average to see whether or not you're being overcharged or undercharged, if you're actually receiving a good deal for your transfer. So very importantly is to compare the digital with non-digital. Pretty much, what is the cheapest payment method to send my money across to any particular country? Whilst banks have a global reach and they're basically everywhere, mobile money is catching up, and right now they're actually the cheapest payment method at 4.47, whilst cash transfers are actually the most expensive. That's a difference of almost 3%, or on average about 3.8%. So when it comes to greater amounts, it actually adds up to quite a bit of money. Yes. So as much as we may hate or be reluctant to use e-wallets or mobile money simply because we don't know how it works, or we don't really like using digital devices for our money, we're just used to having something physical in our wallets and in our pockets where we know exactly where it is. When it comes to costs, mobile money and digital money are way cheaper than holding physical cash in your wallets. Even so, the average cost when using a card is actually about 5.30%. So it's not way behind mobile money, but if you want to save a pretty penny on making an international transfer, you definitely be looking at using mobile money.
Especially if you're transferring a larger sum of money, obviously.
Exactly. Bear in mind that costs add up, especially when you're sending a lot of money. But even so, if you take it over 20, 30 years of making maybe one payment a year, you'll realize that during your lifetime, you're spending maybe more on fees than those making payments regularly, because experience teaches us really well to look at fees, especially when we're doing it on a daily basis. So in that respect, I also wanted to gather a list of average transfer costs for our viewers, so you can actually review the payment providers and get the total cost. Bear in mind that what you see may not be what you get. Therefore, before you say my payment provider is cheaper or I found a cheaper way to transfer money, make sure you reach the screen or the point where you have the total costs in front of you. And then you can compare them to these countries and say exactly whether or not it's a good deal or maybe you need to keep searching. And switching to transfer fees overall, the greatest increases in transfer costs within the last 3 months, especially now with the pandemic and the migration towards digital money, it became much more expensive to send money to Italy, to Germany, and of course to Japan as well. So if you're targeting these particular countries, you really need to do a bit of research because the costs are increasing on a quarterly basis. So what you pay right now for a particular transfer might be more expensive within a month or even 2 months from now.
So and you would recommend, sorry to interrupt, you would recommend that people compare and that they don't just blindly always use the same method of transfer that they've always used, because they might be able to get a much better deal with a change.
Yes, I agree. And in that respect, we made at least one change in our lifetime, maybe from eating one type of biscuits to another. Oh, we simply just switched the tea providers because we wanted to try something else. It's very similar in payments, and I know we're talking about maybe apples and oranges, but it's still exchanging money for a service. So in that respect, yes, myself, I enjoy creating a structure of trusted providers that I use for specific activities. But when it comes to payments, the market is evolving really fast. So in that respect, unless you're fine paying more than you should, then of course, it's well worth checking the market.
And who is fine paying more than they should? I think nobody. I don't know anybody who's happy to pay more than they need to pay for.
Myself, I prefer being cost efficient because at the end of the day, that's extra money I can invest in something else. So having said that, I'm all up for finding the easiest way and the least time expensive way to locate exactly what I need. So
but my money has to arrive. My money has to arrive. This is
Exactly.
the most important
Yes,
thing.
but we're talking about finding something that in investments we call the efficient frontier. The least charges with the best delivery time, with the best customer support, and if possible, additional tools like bonuses and all sorts. So yeah,
Definitely.
that's the case. And nowadays, the least expensive transfers in the G20 countries are, of course, Russia, Republic of Korea, and Saudi Arabia. And of course, those of you who are still considering sending money to the UK now before Brexit, they actually registered the greatest decrease in remittance costs along with Canada as well. And
I think more people are transferring out than in, but that's just my personal opinion.
About 2 years ago, there was a massive migration back to the UK. However, lately I've seen a lot of British individuals trying to counter the balance with some properties abroad, with some investments abroad, just in case, because at the end of the day, any such massive change in an economic structure in the world will have repercussions throughout the next couple of years. So it's always good to have options in that respect. But the World Bank actually comes and brings us an even better way of assessing of whether or not we're smart enough to make international payments. They actually built the Smart Remittance Target Indicator in 2015, which simply compares how much money is a smart person saving by getting all the information they need before they make a transfer. So having said that, they found that compared to the people who don't research, that usually pay 6.75% in fees for a transfer, a savvy consumer actually pays only 4.17%. Added over a longer period of time, I guess it adds up to significant savings. And of course,
Especially with a lot
the more
of money.
people,
Yes.
it is indeed. And as more people gain access to knowledge, they can simply decrease their costs overall, because at the end of the day, we're migrating towards cheaper payment methods and a greater global reach. So the question is, do you want to be a smart money transfer?
I definitely do. I'm listening and learning.
Exactly. This is the reason why we're having this conversation, basically to gain some understanding into how to make smarter transfers internationally. As I said, the additional information included in this PDF for those of you who purchased the VIP entries are also the particular routes where it's easier or it's a bit more difficult in initiating smart transfers, basically moving money from A to B. And of course, what is the trend in terms of new payment services across the globe? These are split, of course, based on the type of income as well. So if you know exactly the segment of the market you're targeting in terms of B2C payment methods, you have this to help you out identify what sort of payment methods you should migrate or implement in your payment systems. And of course, I've also added some more information with regards to the probability of a transfer going through. I'm not sure if many are aware. Myself, I had the misfortune of having specific declines in terms of different payment methods or unnecessary delays. So those of you looking to see whether or not the payments will go through, you can simply just scroll through the presentation. And based on your particular income as an individual and on the region, you'll see how fast or how likely it is to receive your money. Now, having written down your answers, you should have at least a clear overview right now of your target audience, whether you're looking to send money to an individual or to a company or even to the government, transfer amount, how often you'd like to make some payments, whether or not there's currency conversion, and of course the estimated delivery time based on the location. average transfer costs, and whether or not new payment methods will be made available within that region. With that knowledge, you can actually proceed in finding a suitable payment provider. You have quite a few options. If you don't mind spending a couple of hours on Google, you can do that, but it can become quite overwhelming because different payment providers are trying to attract customers even though they haven't yet launched the transfer to a particular region. So it might be a bit tricky finding the right provider. That's why I recommend clicking on the link provided to you in this presentation to check the available payment methods and the relevant fees compiled by the World Bank. It's a really good website. They show exactly the fees, which countries you can send money to, back and forth, if you're receiving funds as well, what to expect. So my personal and professional recommendation is to check the World Bank. It's a click away, and you just select where you are and where you're sending money, or the other way around. As I said, if you want to spend some time on Google, you can use at least 4 of the answers you've written down, and you can find comparison websites to help you identify the best payment provider, or simply you can go through the presentation here. You can find the payment providers there, because I have given specific names and specific payment providers which are preferred across the globe or in particular regions. And of course, one of the last areas you need to consider specifically, global reach, very important, whether or not you need to implement payments with the same provider into a different region, whether they're looking to expand or not. Of course, retail versus business accounts. I had a very interesting question from one of my clients recently. She was asking me, why can I not pay with my PayPal account for my business? That's an excellent question. The problem here lies with the regulation, and of course with the way you actually deduct expenses from an accounting perspective as well. So if you'd like to use that particular payment method regularly for your business, my recommendation is to use a corporate account, or basically not a retail account, specifically because it actually helps you deduct expenses and trace every payment across the globe for reconciliation purposes, from anti-money laundering, and of course, if you have an audit, you can show exactly where the money went. The downside in using a retail, if you're a firm, is that you cannot deduct it as an expense. More often than not, if you can, in your particular jurisdiction, it's only part of that amount, or it may fall under a specific exception based on the service or the goods you purchased with that particular payment provider. So in that respect, use corporate accounts for firms. I know they have a bit more documents required when opening an account, but it's well worth using that, because you also have history, you have the payment providers doing due diligence on your behalf on the people that send you money through them as well. So before being a bit upset that you're spending slightly longer sending documents across to a payment provider, I would recommend thinking about, if you were to receive money from a third party, wouldn't you want them to be vetted as well?
Exactly. Yes. You want it to be secure. If you're sending money across the world, exactly, you need it to be secure in both directions.
Exactly, I fully agree. So in that respect, regulation does quite a lot. With developed countries, you've got quite a lot of regulation, thus the pile of paperwork you have to submit, or forms you have to fill out with every payment or when you register an account. But very important is also the reputation and of the payment provider and the number of complaints. Especially with the new generations, the second you want to assess a new provider of any sort, you just go on Google, search quickly to see what sort of feedback they receive from their clients, which can be quite important, especially when it comes to payments. As I said, in payments, most of the companies hold the crown for maybe a year or two, but then somebody else comes in with a competitive edge, providing potentially a better solution or lower costs. So it's always good to check the complaints and the reputation of the company with a 2-minute Google search. And in that respect, of course, my personal recommendation nowadays, with all the changes, both on the legal side, with US elections, with Brexit, with COVID and lockdown, myself, I recommend checking the news related to that provider on Google, not on the company news website, because many of them tend to wrap it in a very pink and beautiful and sugar-coated way. Whereas independent news providers tend to present facts as they are. So if you notice that you'd like to make a payment within the next week, but the payment provider is due to be sent to court, or they're changing headquarters, that usually translates into your payment may not go through, or if they're changing headquarters or offices due to Brexit or other reasons, there might be extra delays because the staff is being moved from one place to another more often than not. The good people, the ones that we love having on the phone when we say, hey, I really need your help right now. So these are the areas I consider very important when assessing payment providers. As I mentioned, you have access to this PowerPoint presentation with the VIP pass, and you can always get in touch with Catherine or myself to actually discuss further. We're always happy to help.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maria. That was an extremely thorough overview of all of the various options which are available over there. Maybe you would like to just give us some information to close up as to how people can best contact you if they are looking, if they feel that they don't know how to best proceed with this kind of thing, and they're looking for advice that maybe you can offer to them. Where would be the best place for them to look for you online?
First and foremost, thank you for your patience so far. It might have been quite complex. I'm a very detail-oriented person. In that respect, feel free to reach me on LinkedIn, Maria Iacob, or via my website, Wiser Finance. However, if you're a company looking to open an office offshore, or to expand in a particular market, or even reduce your business and find cost-efficient ways to transfer funds, B2B or B2C, I'd recommend having a chat with Catherine, that I know for quite a few years, and she can actually provide you a better overview of how to structure it from the beginning until the end. Myself, I'm happy to talk to you about money. This is my favorite, this is my passion. But if you'd like a big overview of how to expand into a market, or basically make your company more efficient, especially in Asia, I personally and warmly recommend Catherine for that.
Thank you, Maria. That's such very kind recommendation. Yeah, I love to also work on these topics as well. So thank you for taking the time today, Maria. It's been great talking to you again. And we will catch up soon, I'm sure.
Shall do. Thank you very much. And everybody, keep on finding the best way. Don't give up.
Thank you.